Hello and welcome to the CHS Annual Refresher Training. If you are watching this means that you have been part of our team for at least 1 year. I know many of you have been with us for much longer. So we want to thank you for being part of the CHS team. And we are so grateful that you continue to choose us as your employer. As part of the standard state of Michigan compliance procedure, as well as the CHS policy, there is required training and documentation that needs to be completed annually. So if you've not done so, make sure that you pause this video and go ahead and clock in under CHS training. This presentation should last about an hour. It might last a little bit longer, but just make sure that you note in the comments that this is for the annual training. If you are required to complete a TB test or CPR and first aid, an additional hour for each of those is allotted. So let's go ahead and get started. Excuse me. The first topic that we will be covering is person-centered planning. And this is the process of planning for and supporting the individual receiving services, and it builds upon the individual's strengths and capacity to engage in community activities. And this is done so by honoring the individual's preferences, choices, and abilities. And it involves family members, friends, and professionals the individual wishes or prefers to be part of. Community mental health ensures that a person-centered planning process is used to develop a written developed plan of services in partnership with the recipient. The 1996 revisions of the Mental Health Code require a person-centered approach to the planning, selection, and delivery of the support services and/or treatment you receive from the public mental health system. Person-centered planning is the process of learning how a person wants to live. And this is to have a set plan in place, but it's not meant to control or solve those individuals' problems. Self-determination, this is an important part of the person-centered planning. It assures people with developmental disabilities and or mental illness the authority to make meaningful choices and to control their own lives, or to have control over their own lives. And this provides choices and new experiences and helps a person want more control over their own lives. So along with this, there are 6 guiding principles. The first one is person-directed. This is where the person directs the planning process with necessary supports and accommodations and decides when and where the planning meetings are held, what is discussed, and who is invited. The second guiding principle is person-centered, and this is where the planning focuses on the person, not the system or the person's family, guardian, or friends. The third guiding principle is outcome-based. Outcomes in pursuit of the person's preferences and goals are identified, as well as services and supports that enable the person to achieve his or her goals, plans, and desires, and any training that is needed for the providers who provide the services. The fourth guiding principle is information, support, and accommodations. And this is as needed, the person receives comprehensive and unbiased information on the array of mental health services, community resources, and available providers. Support accommodations to assist the person to participate in the process are provided. The fifth guiding principle is independent facilitation. And this is where people have the information and support to choose an independent facilitator to assist them in planning this process. And then finally, the sixth guiding principle is pre-planning. And the purpose of pre-planning is for the person to gather all of the information and resources necessary for effective person-centered planning and to set an agenda for the process. So the individual plan of service will serve as a roadmap of the person's dreams and desires. And it will be guided by hopes, dreams, preferences, and then the values and desires of consumers. The services and supports that an individual needs to reach their goals are provided by the DSP. So that is your main job, is to follow their plan and help the individual that you are assisting increase their independence or maintain it, and to help them work on those specific goals in their plan. You are responsible for knowing what the consumer goals and objectives are and what your responsibilities are to assist the individual in achieving them. You must know where each individual's record is kept, read, and be familiar with the PCP and work with the lead staff or a care coordinator and other DSPs at the home to provide necessary services and supports identified in the PCP. You must read through the PCP and sign off on the training log before working with any individual. Excuse me. And I do want to note that when you are signing off on those training logs, to make sure that you are signing with your legal name. I know many of you do have nicknames, but make sure that it is your legal name that you are signing off on. So as a DSP, know that the work you do benefits the freedom and independence of another human being. So it's a very important job. But without you, this process would not work. You are very important to the person-centered planning process because you know the person, you understand what is important to them, you understand the person's communication style, you have a trusting relationship with them, you support this person in different environments, and you are the person turns to for assistance and support. Your job is to encourage and support. You're not there to tell them what to do or to control their life. You are there to help them learn to care for themselves and their home. So if you believe it can be done and you do your job well, the person you are teaching will become more independent. And that is such a great thing to see. So planning the PCP goals. The language used at the meeting should be clearly understood by all, and it is kept positive. The individual has all the information needed to make choices and has time to communicate them. The focus of planning is on the dreams and desires of that person. The meeting belongs to the person who decides the following with the help of the support circle. So they're deciding the outcome of the meeting, who they want to invite, and it's usually key people in their lives. So like guardians, close family members, friends. And then what to discuss, when and where to hold the meeting, and who should facilitate. The meeting should share information, discuss wants, wishes, and dreams as identified during the pre-planning process and involve future planning. The person support plan will include the future statement. Each desired outcome will require documentation, which is why documentation is so important. Your documentation has a direct effect on the evaluation process, and without accurate documentation, the adjustments may not be right for the individual's progress or safety. We constantly need to change plans to better meet the goals of each individual, and plans may be changed as the goals are met. So moving along to the rights of recipients of mental health services, so recipient rights. A recipient is anyone who receives mental health services from a community mental health or a licensed psychiatric hospital. A right is something that is defined in law and protected by law. Chapter 7 of the Mental Health Code grants recipient rights that are available to people who receive public mental health services in the state. When a person receives mental health services, Michigan's Mental Health Code and other state and federal laws safeguard their rights. So as a staff, you are responsible to protect these rights. Abuse, this is defined as a non-accidental act, and that determines which class of abuse is identified. Results of abuse include death, sexual assault, serious physical harm, non-serious physical harm or having caused pain, using force even without injury, in the absence of imminent risk or harm to somebody, exploitation, sexual harassment, and using words or actions to threaten or degrade a recipient. Abuse Class 1 is a non-accidental act or provocation of another to act by an employee, volunteer, or agent of a provider that caused or contributed to death, sexual abuse, or serious physical harm. Abuse Class 2, there are 5 types of acts that are considered Abuse Class 2. There is non-serious physical harm, which is a non-accidental act or provocation. And this means physical damage or what could reasonably be construed as pain suffered by a recipient that physician or registered nurse determines could not have caused or contributed to the death of a recipient or the permanent disfigurement of a recipient. And it includes acts that cause either an injury, such as bruising or minor scratches or pain. Emotional harm. This is impaired psychological functioning, growth, or development of a significant nature. It is an action that results in the recipient behaving in a way that is harmful to the recipient themselves that was not happening before, or results in the recipient engaging in new behavior that shows impaired functioning. Assume incompetent. To act as someone has a guardian when they do not, resulting in significant loss of money or property. It also is abuse if this action by staff results in emotional harm. Unreasonable force. Unreasonable force means physical management or force used when there is no imminent risk of harm to the recipient, staff, or others. The physical management is not approved. The physical management used is not in compliance with the emergency interventions authorized in the person-centered plan. Other less restrictive measures were possible, but not attempted immediately prior. And then finally, exploitation. This is an action that involves the misappropriation or misuse of a recipient's property or funds for the benefit of an individual or individuals other than the recipient, buying for themselves or others, borrowing, and stealing. Abuse class 3. The use of language or other means of communication by an employee, volunteer, or agent of the provider to degrade, threaten, or sexually harass a recipient. So the definitions of degrade, threaten, and sexual harassment. Degrade means to treat humiliatingly or to use language or efforts that insult a person's heritage, mental status, race, sexual orientation, gender, intelligence, etc. Threaten means to tell someone that you will hurt them or cause problems if they do not do what you want them to do. Sexual harassment means sexual advances to a recipient, requests for sexual favors from a recipient, or other conduct or communication of a sexual nature toward a recipient. Here are a few examples of abuse. Throwing an object at a recipient, hitting, beating, stopping, or kicking a recipient, any sexual encounters regardless of if the recipient consents, cursing at a recipient, the use of degrading language about or in the presence of the recipient, taking or borrowing of personal items from a recipient, physically holding a recipient when they are not at risk of harm, and making comments about a recipient's weight, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Neglect. This is an act of commission, which is something you do that you should not have done, or omission, something you don't do that you should have done. It is not compliance with the standard of care or treatment required by law and/or rules, policies, guidelines, written directives, procedures, or individual plan of services. An example of this is you give a recipient an extra pill from the medication listed in their treatment plan 6 hours early, so you don't have to give it to them later, would be commission. Not giving the medication at all is omission. The recipient needs assistance to get out of the van and staff fail to assist. That is neglect. If the staff push them out of the van, that is considered abuse. An act of commission or omission that results from noncompliance that cause or contributes to the death, sexual abuse, or serious physical harm to a recipient. This is neglect class 1. An example of this is a staff member gave recipient John Mary's medications by mistake. John was taken to the hospital and was in a coma for 3 days. This is neglect class 1 because John sustained serious physical harm and because staff failed to follow standard medication administration protocols. Neglect class 2 is an act of commission or omission that results from noncompliance. It causes or contributes to non-serious physical harm or emotional harm to a recipient. An example of this is a staff member was transporting John home and stopped at a store to get some milk, leaving John unattended for about 5 minutes. John's person center plan requires he have staff next to him when out in the community, and John got out of his car and ran into the road, fell, and bruised his knee. So this is neglect because the staff was supposed to stay with the consumer according to the plan, and he did not. Thankfully, that consumer was not seriously injured, but he still was injured, and the situation could have been worse. So that's why that is neglect. Neglect class 3, an act of commission or omission that results from noncompliance that either placed or could have placed a recipient at risk of physical harm or sexual abuse. An example of this, John left home early in the morning. Staff were unaware of this until the police arrived with John several hours later. The police report they found him unharmed in his pajamas near a pond several miles away from his home. John's PCP states that staff are to know his whereabouts at all times because he has poor safety skills. This is neglect class 3 because staff failed to follow his plan and he was placed at risk of harm. Excuse me. Here are a few other examples of neglect. Not putting on a recipient seatbelt, over or under medicating a recipient, items left on the floor, especially those that may be a trip hazard, leaving a one-on-one alone, leaving a pen with a recipient who has a no small objects in the treatment plan, leaving a recipient unattended when staff is required, and lack of medical treatment. Failure to report apparent or suspected abuse or neglect is neglect. So make sure that if you ever, even think that you have seen it, or if you've heard about it, you don't know if it's true, you always want to report it. That is the job of the recipient rights officer, is to open the investigation and go from there. Your job is to report it. Retaliation and harassment. You are required to report any known or suspected instances of abuse and neglect. So this may cause your coworkers, that take actions that may have a negative impact on you. Agencies are required by law to take disciplinary action against persons who engage in retaliatory or harassing activity. You should report to the administration and to the Office of Recipient Rights if your coworkers retaliate or harass you for making a report. So just like you and I, the recipients who, the consumers, they all have, start this over. Just like you and I, we all have constitutional rights, and so do our consumers. They have the right to have religious expression, freedom of speech, discriminatory protection, right to vote, education, privacy, competency, communication, property, control of money, freedom of movement, confidentiality, consent, dignity, and respect, and any legal issues. So if they want to see a lawyer, they have that right to do so. Confidentiality. This is the state of keeping or being kept secret or private. Protecting confidentiality means that when you are at work, you cannot talk to anyone about what happened with the recipient. When at work, you cannot discuss any information with those who are not authorized to receive it. It also means that you have a responsibility to make sure that unauthorized persons are not able to identify recipients. So the general rule of thumb, be protective of the personal information of our recipients. So if you don't know who you're talking to, do not give them any information. And if you have any questions over that, make sure you're contacting your lead staff or care coordinator. So listed are some examples of how you may unwillingly violate confidentiality. Talking about recipients outside of work. Referring to recipients by name when discussing work with family or friends. Giving information over the phone to persons who say they are relatives. Taking photographs or videotapes of recipients without permission. Listening in on a recipient's phone calls. Remember, their phone calls are private, so do not listen into those. Discussing information in a recipient's record with staff from another home, or with other mental health or service professionals who are not authorized to receive the information. So this one's another big one because I know many of you do train at different locations. So just remember, even though you may work at the same company, not everybody works with the same consumers, and your consumers' information is meant to be kept private. Referring to a recipient by name in other recipient's record or add an incident report for another recipient. So if you do have to write an incident report that was involving two consumers, make sure you only name the consumer that you refer to on that incident report. Don't put both the names on. Dignity and respect, two big terms that connect well with our jobs here. Dignity, this is to be treated with esteem, honor, politeness, to be dressed in a manner that is not patronizing, condescending, or demeaning, to be treated as equal, to be treated the way any individual would like to be treated. Respect, to show deferential regard for, to be treated with esteem, concern, consideration, or appreciation, to protect the individual's privacy, to be sensitive to cultural differences, and to allow an individual to make choices. So here are some examples of dignity and respect. Calling a person by his or her preferred name. Knocking on a closed door before entering. Because remember, if you're in your own home, you don't want people busting through your door. So make sure you're knocking just to let them know that you'll be coming in. Using positive language. Encouraging the person to make choices instead of making assumptions about what he or she wants. Taking the person's opinion seriously. Completing incident reports or IRs. So an IR needs to be completed when a recipient of mental health services is injured, and if they require first aid or stay to the emergency room or hospitalized, if they fall and is injured, or the fall was serious enough that an injury is likely to show later. If a recipient is involved in a traffic accident, a recipient is suspected of committing a criminal offense or is arrested and convicted, showing any unusual challenging behavior, emergency physical intervention is used, or if a recipient dies or is seriously injured. An employee is responsible for administering medications. If they willfully disregard or change a physician's order, document falsely, or alters documentation, misses or delays passing a medication, and no protocol instructs the employee how to proceed, misses or delays passing a medication due to the circumstances beyond the employee's control, and no protocol instructs the employee how to proceed, fails to follow the 5 rights, or fails to follow a medical protocol. So if there is some sort of medication error, make sure you're documenting that on the incident report. You will do an IR if you suspect or are told that the recipient has been abused or neglected or any other rights violations has occurred. You suspect or are told that a recipient has been exploited by sexual acts, or if the allegations or suspicion of abuse or neglect and serious injury shall be immediately verbally reported to your supervisor and the Office of Recipient Rights after you assure the recipient's safety. So here is an example of an incident report. Again, these are completed anytime anything out of the ordinary occurs. And if you're unsure, just ask your lead staff or your care coordinator. You want to ensure that you are filling out the entire form completely, no blank entries. You can write NA if needed. And you want to be as specific as possible with all the details. So this is just like you're kind of painting a picture. Remember that the people that are reading this document were not there. So you want to be as clear as possible. You want to paint that picture, tell that story. So if you do need, there's not a whole lot of space to write on these forms. So if you need to explain further, go ahead and use the second piece of paper. And then you want to document how you can prevent a recurrence of the incident. If you're unsure of how to do that, because some incidents are very hard to, I guess, prevent and figure out a good way to do it, because some of them are just kind of out of our control. So if you're unsure of how to do that, make sure to contact your lead staff or care coordinator. And then once you are done, complete a fax to CMH and CHS as soon as possible, but no later than 24 hours. All right, moving on to limited English proficiency or LEP. So why do we need to know about this? All community mental health staff are required to know about accommodating people with LEP. LEP is defined as an individual's inability to speak, read, write, or understand English at a level that permits effective interaction with healthcare providers. It's the legal basis. LEP compliance is our legal obligation. However, there is no single LEP law, and this involves family, friends, professionals as desired by the recipient. And just remember that English is not the native language of America, of the USA. We actually have no official language. So we will not allow minors, other consumers, or consumers' family or friends to act as interpreters. This is only acceptable in emergency situations. If the consumer chooses a family member or friend after they have been informed of their right to free language assistance, it must be documented with the consumer's sign-off. Environmental safety. You should be familiar by now with the specific needs of your consumer, especially any safety needs that are pointed out at the PCP. So severe storms and tornado safety. Make sure you know where the safest place in the home is if a severe storm or tornado were to occur. If a basement is not available or practical for use, the safest place is usually the smallest centrally located room without a window. So just a little refresher on storms. A watch, it means conditions are favorable for a severe storm or tornado to occur. And a warning means that a severe storm or tornado is actually happening and you should take cover. If you are traveling when conditions are favorable for a tornado, you're going to drive to the nearest large building that can be used as a shelter. Stay near a shelter until the threat has passed. If you are driving and a warning is issued, seek shelter in a large building. If a building is not available, you may need to lie down in a ditch or ravine. Do not try to outrun a tornado in your vehicle. Winter storms. Living here in Michigan, we're pretty familiar with snow. Winter storms call for special precautions. Snowfall, blizzards, and ice storms can trap people inside for days. Snow and ice can break power lines and cause loss of electricity and heat, which also causes utility failure. Extended exposure to cold temperatures may cause injury or death. So what are some precautions you can take? Having a battery-powered radio. Draw water into as many containers as possible. Gather battery-powered lanterns, flashlights, etc. Make sure you have a corded phone or a cell phone that is charged. If you experience heat failure, dress in layers and keep moving. If your home has fuel delivery, remember to assure an adequate supply of fuel is available at all times. If you are experiencing a heat failure, you may want to keep a steady trickle of water from each faucet to prevent the pipes from freezing. Floods. Now, floods are pretty rare here in Michigan, but they do happen. And the peak time for floods is in the spring and fall. They can interrupt power and make roads impassable. So if there is a flood that's going to be happening, you will get notifications and warning from the television, radio, sirens, and alert monitors. Sometimes emergency personnel will go door to door, and you can get them from the National Weather Service or local emergency jurisdiction. If there is water covering the road, don't drive through it. Just make sure you turn around and find another route. Power outage concerns, air conditioning failure. This can pose a serious threat to the elderly or those with serious health conditions. So tips to help keep cool: shut all curtains, don't open windows unless it will let cooler air in. Go to a lower level of the home if possible. Foods that spoil. A loaded freezer will keep foods frozen 36 to 48 hours if the door is shut. Avoid opening the freezer or refrigerator. Transfer foods you will use soon in an insulated chest type freezer. If you can obtain ice, transfer as much as possible into the coolers. Gas leaks. So if you suspect a gas leak, you want to do the following. Evacuate immediately. Do not turn any electrical switches on or off. Do not use the telephone. Do not use any matches or lighters. Go to the neighbors and call the gas company right away. Carbon monoxide poisoning. This is a clear, odorless gas. The symptoms include headaches, dizziness, and sleepiness. If carbon monoxide detector goes off or you suspect carbon monoxide poisoning, you must evacuate immediately. Fire protection. Immediate evacuation is key to safety in a fire or smoke emergency. Your first priority, if you smell smoke, see flames, or the fire sounds, is assisting people out of the home as soon as possible. Fighting a fire is never recommended. So using a fire extinguisher, an ABC multi-purpose extinguisher will put out most fires that start at the home. So using the fire extinguisher, you want to hold it upright and pull the pin out. Stand at least 6 to 8 feet from the fire. Do not get closer. Aim the nozzle at the base of the fire and squeeze the handles. And sweep side to side slowly, moving closely as the flames diminish. Fire extinguishers only last a short time, about 8 to 10 seconds. So fires can reignite and they double in size every 19 seconds. So that's pretty quickly. That's why you want to get out of that house as soon as possible. You should know how to assist or evacuate a person before an emergency. So are you confident in your ability to do this? If you're not, make sure that you get with your lead, the consumer's family, go over their plan so that way in an emergency, you know how to safely evacuate that person. Fire prevention is key to a safer environment. So you want to make sure that there are enough working smoke detectors in the home. You want to make sure the detectors are properly placed according to the manufacturer's instructions. Make sure that they're tested on a regular basis. The batteries are replaced at least once a year. And don't just take the battery out of the smoke detector because it keeps going off. If you are having nuisance alarms, check to see if the detector is located too close to that area, and then you can move it as needed. So moving on to Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. This is a federal law that was enacted in 1996 to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare, reduce administrative costs through standardization, especially claims and billings, and to protect the rights of consumers of healthcare and ensure the privacy and security of health information. The privacy rule creates the first national standards to protect the individual's medical records and other personal health information. Further, this rule gives consumers more control over their health information, sets boundaries on the use and release of health records, establishes appropriate safeguards that the healthcare providers and others must achieve to protect the privacy of health information, holds violators accountable with civil and criminal penalties, and strikes a balance when public responsibility supports disclosure of some forms of data. So in general, the agency must inform consumers about their privacy rights and how their information can be used, adopt and implement privacy policies and procedures, train employees about HIPAA, designate an individual to be responsible for seeing that the privacy procedures are adopted and followed, protect consumer records so that they are not readily available to those who do not need them, follow the minimum necessary standard in using and disclosing health information, assure that the agency has a HIPAA compliant agreement with business associates who have access to healthcare information. So what rights do consumers have under HIPAA privacy? They have the right to receive a copy of the agency privacy notice, inspect and copy their case record, a list of disclosures, request restriction on the use of disclosure of information, and request confidential communications. So for example, a request not to have the agency sent to their home address. So cultural competence and diversity in the community. As we all know, communities are made up of a variety of people, and these people are different in many ways. Diversity education is not about conforming or all becoming like each other. It's about valuing diversity. It's about allowing, respecting, and appreciating differences are all benefits that will enhance relationships in a work or community environment. Different perspectives can enhance and boost morale, and we can all learn from each other's unique ideas and perspectives because we can all appreciate diversity. Some different diversities include gender, age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and physical abilities. Prejudice is not just about race, it's about a natural human emotion. We all have the tendency to fear or distrust people and ideas that are different from us or what we have grown accustomed to. It is important to learn ways of overcoming this fear so we can accept each other for who we are. We all have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. So a few pointers for communication in a diverse community are openness, active listening, respectful language, and sensitivity. Infection control. This is about preventing the spread of germs that cause illness and infections. So about germs, everyone comes in contact with millions of germs each day. They thrive in warm, moisture, darkness, and oxygen. Many are harmless and are needed for our bodies, but some are harmful and cause diseases and illness. There are 3 ways that germs are spread. That is direct contact, indirect contact, and droplet spread. Direct contact means that germs are spread from one infected person to another. Indirect contact means that germs are spread from one infected person to another person through an object. And then droplet spread means that germs are spread through the air from one infected person to another. Controlling the spread of germs. DSPs can protect both themselves and the individuals with whom they work for from germs or contamination by doing the following. Know and practice standard precautions. Keep yourself, the individual, and the environment clean. Be aware of the signs and symptoms of illness and infection and accurately record them and report them to a doctor. Bloodborne pathogens. This is infectious organisms that are spread by direct contact with the infected blood or body fluids. They can be transmitted through sexual contact, intravenous drug use, or exposure of mucous membranes or non-intact skin. Hepatitis B, C, and HIV are all bloodborne viral diseases. These diseases can cause lifelong infection, cirrhosis, liver cancer, liver failure, and even death. And blood may be present in any body fluid. Standard precautions are a set of infection control safeguards. The only thing you can do is to use standard precautions, so this means treating all blood or body fluids as potentially infectious. Blood can be anywhere, you just can't see it. You just may not see it. Following safe work practices can greatly minimize your risk. So proper hand washing, disposal of sharps, good housekeeping, and use of protective personal equipment. Hand washing. Frequent, thorough, and vigorous hand washing will help in decreasing the spread of infection. Germs are spread more frequently by hands and fingers than any other means. And DSP should always wash their hands when they come to work and before leaving. DSP should wash their hands before touching any food, medicine, kitchen utensils, someone's skin, before putting on disposable gloves, before using the bathroom. And then you should always wash your hands after using the bathroom, sneezing, coughing, blowing your nose, touching one's eyes, nose, mouth, or other body parts, touching bodily fluids or excretions, and touching someone's soiled bed linen. Gloving. You should always wear gloves when you are assisting with any rectal or genital care, toothbrushing or flossing, shaving with a blade razor, menstrual care, bathing or showering, cleaning up urine, feces, vomit, or blood, providing wound care, handling soiled linen or clothing, giving care when the DSP has open cuts or oozing sores on his or her hands, providing first aid, disposing of waste in leak-proof airtight containers. You always want to wear a new pair of gloves when you're starting a new activity. You never want to just wash the gloves, put a new pair on. Don't ever reuse them. Depending on your job, you may be expected to wear other personal protective equipment or PPE. So you should always remember to keep your hands away from your face, limit surfaces touched, change gloves when torn or heavily contaminated, and perform hand hygiene. Personal protective equipment, if you do have to wear PPE, you should put it out of the following order. You're going to first put your gown on, your mask, goggles, and then finally gloves. Cleaning and disinfecting. This is routine daily cleaning of household surfaces and other items with soap and water. Sometimes an additional cleaning is needed to be germ-free, and that is called disinfection. Disinfection is the process of killing germs after cleaning with soap, water, and then rinsing with clear water. All right, we're getting near towards the end here. Hopefully, we probably have about 20 minutes left. Internal corporate compliance. So our corporate compliance officer is Mark Lee. In order to effectively enforce the compliance program and incorporated policies, CHS expects its employees to report any perceived violations of the program and or applicable federal, state, and third-party rules to the CHS Compliance Liaison Officer, which is, again, Mark Lee. Employees and subcontractors may report any compliance-related concerns to the CHS Compliance Liaison Officer by the following methods. You can draft a written note and place it in a sealed envelope marked confidential, and placing such envelope in the compliance officer's internal mailbox or directly speaking to him. All reports on compliance-related concerns will be taken seriously. Some concerns may be merely seeking advice or clarifications, and some concerns might provide information that is too sparse to act upon. Any HR issues should be directed to HR and not the compliance officer. And CHS is committed to using good faith efforts to comply with applicable healthcare laws, regulations, and third-party payer requirements. Michigan False Claims Act, or MFCA, is a state law established to prohibit fraud in obtaining of benefits or payments in connection with the medical assistance program, to prohibit kickbacks or bribes in connection with the program, and to prohibit conspiracies in obtaining benefits or payments. The law authorizes the Attorney General to investigate alleged violations of this act and provides for civil actions to recover money received by reason of fraudulent conduct through civil fines and other prescribed remedies. The law also establishes non-retaliation protections for employees in reporting suspected fraud and abuse. The False Claims Act is a federal law that establishes criminal and civil liability when any covered person or covered entity improperly receives reimbursement from or avoids payments to the federal government. The act specifically excludes tax fraud, which is covered by other statutes. Due to its role in processing payments from the Medicaid program and the state general funds, individuals and entities that do business with CHS are covered entities. The FCA includes a quantum provision, which literally means who sues on behalf of the king as for himself. This provision allows a private citizen to file suit in the name of the U.S. government, charging fraud by government contractors and other entities that receive or use government funds. The filer of the suit may share in any money recovered. So there's multiple different kinds of frauds. I'm not going to go through this whole list. I'm going to go through some of them. So billing for goods and services that were never delivered or rendered. Upcoding, so inflating bills by using diagnosis bills codes that suggest a more extensive illness or treatment. Excuse me. Phantom employees and doctor time slips. So charging for employees that were not actually on the job or billing for made up hours to maximize reimbursement. Billing Medicare for services that were not performed or that were not necessary. The whistleblowers are those private citizens who file suit on behalf of the government to recover damages incurred by the federal government as a result of a contractor fraud or other false claims. Whistleblowers may be entitled to a significant portion of the proceeds should the suit prevail and protected from retaliation by provision of the statute. In particular, any retaliation against an employee or a contractor for lawfully reporting alleged violation of the False Claims Act, or who is discharged, demoted, suspended, threatened, harassed, or in any other manner discriminated against in the terms and conditions of employment by his or her employer, because of lawful acts done by the employee on behalf of his employer or others in furtherance of an action under the law, including investigation for, initiation of, testimony for, or assistance in an action filed or to be filed under the law, shall be entitled to all relief necessary to make the employee whole. So I know all of that was pretty worried, a lot of words. But basically, the gist of this is enforcing compliance helps companies prevent and detect violations of rules, which protects the company from any fines and or lawsuits. Hearing loss. According to the CDC, deaf individuals do not hear well enough to rely on their hearing to process speech and language. Individuals who are hard of hearing differ from deaf individuals in that they use their hearing to assist communication with others. Hearing loss can affect an individual the way that they experience sound, communicate with others, and the way that they view their hearing loss. Some individuals who develop hearing loss later in life find it difficult to adjust to a world with limited sound and to adapt to new behaviors that compensate for hearing loss. So the official definitions, hearing loss is a decrease in hearing sensitivity in one or both ears. So with hearing loss, you can still hear. There's just a decrease in how well you hear. Deafness is a profound or total loss of hearing in both ears, resulting in not hearing well enough to rely on hearing to process speech and language. So some guidelines for better communication. You want to decrease the background noise, modify lighting and seating arrangement, move away from fans and noisy machines. You want to provide good lighting, which is keeping light on your face, not behind you, because that could cause a glare. Encourage groups to sit closer to the speaker and to each other, and make sure only one person is speaking at a time. So tips for the speaker: face-to-face communication is the easiest. Continue to face the listener while speaking. Be patient with the listeners. Remember, there is a logical reason behind most lip reading errors. Encourage the individual to wear hearing aids. Ask questions using an either or format or a yes or no format. And try to be understanding and caring when someone with a hearing problem asks you to help them understand better. You may need to repeat or rephrase information. Give important information to the listener in writing to be used later. So write it on a piece of paper so they have it. In a group situation, repeat questions or comments before responding. If someone joins a conversation in progress, give the newcomer a short summary of the topic before proceeding with your discussion. Be flexible with types of cues, paraphrasing, and clarifications you give. Remember, it takes two people to hold a conversation and both people to have a part, to do their part to make a conversation work. All right, so moving on, one of our final topics, trauma. So what is trauma? Trauma occurs when a person is overwhelmed by events or circumstances and responds with intense fear, horror, and helplessness. Extreme stress overwhelms the person's capacity to cope, and trauma is a risk factor in nearly all behavioral health and substance use disorders. People can and they do recover from trauma. 70% of adults in the US have experienced some type of traumatic event in their lives. That's a lot of people. That's 223.4 million people. In public behavioral health, over 90% of clients have experienced trauma. More than 33% of youths exposed to community violence will experience post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a very severe reaction to traumatic events. Acute trauma is a single event that lasts for a short time, so that's like a car crash, major injuries, etc. Complex trauma is the experience of multiple traumatic events, so that could be sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect. And many of the most difficult individuals have experienced complex trauma. So what we mean by most difficult is some of our individuals that have behaviors. A lot of behaviors stem, unfortunately, from trauma. Over time, complex trauma can get in the way of healthy development and affect the individual in the following ways. It can affect their ability to trust others, their sense of personal safety, emotional reactions and ability to manage emotions, ability to navigate to life's changes, physical and emotional responses to stress. Some of the symptoms: trauma can affect an individual's behavior, feelings, relationships, and their view of the world in profound ways. An individual's traumatic stress reactions and other responses to trauma can disrupt a home environment. It's not the answer to everything, but it's another piece of the puzzle, and it's not an excuse, but it may be an explanation. So responses to trauma: hyperarousal, so that's nervousness, jumpiness, quickness to startle. Re-experiencing, so that is re-experiencing is seeing intrusive images, sensations, dreams, having intrusive memories of the traumatic event or events. And then avoidance and withdrawal, so that is feeling numb, shut down, or separated from normal life, pulling away from activities and relationships, and avoiding things that prompt memories of trauma. Some of the factors that influence responses are age and developmental age, the perception of danger faced, past experience with trauma, challenges faced after the trauma, and the presence and availability of adults who can offer that to the individual with trauma. So some examples of trauma could be the sight of blood, the smell of alcohol, seeing a specific color, a scar, shadows on the wall, Santa Claus, losing a tooth. There's many examples of trauma. Traumatized young women or traumatized young children. Be very sensitive to loud noises. Revert to behaviors they have previously outgrown. They may be clingy and unwilling to separate from familiar adults. They may resist leaving places where they feel safe. They may reject or avoid being touched. And they may be confused about what's dangerous and who to go to for protection. Traumatized school-age children, they can alternate between being very shy and withdrawn to unusually aggressive. They may have difficulties with learning. They may demand attention, so increased demands for food, toys, etc. They may revert to old behaviors, or they may show specific anxieties and fears, such as fear of the dark. Traumatized adolescents or adults. A lot of adolescents or adults may live at the moment and have trouble imagining or planning for the future. They may overestimate or underestimate danger. They may behave in aggressive or disruptive ways. They may abuse drugs or alcohol. And they may engage in reckless or destructive behaviors, which include cutting and risky sexual behaviors. Most of us have heard this term before, PTSD, or PSTD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. This is diagnosed when the person displays several traumatic stress reactions. The reactions persist for a long period of time, and the reactions get in the way of living a normal life. Causes of this are extremely stressful or terrifying event, either being part of it or witnessing it. Symptoms may start within the first 3 months, but they may not appear until years later. So what exactly is safety? Physical safety is not the same as psychological safety. To feel psychologically safe, the individual needs to feel oriented in their own environment, have control over some aspects of their lives, know what will happen next, be seen and appreciated for who they are, and to have a sense of connection and continuity from their past. Individuals who have been through trauma are less likely to feel safe than those who have not experienced trauma. These individuals may have real life worries about what pertaining to safety is. So getting development back on track. You always want to let the individual know what will happen next. So keep them on a set routine, no surprises. Be an emotional container, because they may have some emotional outbursts, but let them know that it is okay, that these feelings are okay to have. Physical boundaries. Individuals who have been neglected and abused may have never learned that their bodies should be cared for and protected. They may feel disconnected, see their bodies as vessels of the negative memories and experiences they carry, a constant reminder not only of what has happened to them, but how little they are worth. So again, a person can recover from trauma. The role of resilience, that is the ability to recover from traumatic events. In general, individuals who are resilient see themselves as safe, capable, and lovable, and they see the world and life as manageable, understandable, and meaningful. Some factors that can increase resilience include a strong relationship with at least one competent adult, feeling connected to a positive role model, having talents and abilities nurtured and appreciated, and feeling some control over their life, and then also having a sense of belonging to a community, group, or cause larger than oneself. Recovery after a traumatic event is a process that it takes time. Active coping means accepting the impact of trauma on your life and taking direct action to improve things. You always want to catch others in good moments, so praise, praise, praise. You want to be specific, prompt, and warm. So some self-care basics, make sure that you're getting enough sleep, eat well-balanced meals, use alcohol only in moderation, exercise regularly, take regular breaks from stressful activities, laugh every day, spend some time alone, and exercise. And then what do you do for you every day? So here are some examples of just some little activities that you can do or help your consumer do. Walk the dog, play with the cat, pray, meditate, read a romance novel, write in a journal, chat with neighbors, and breathe deeply. So when you're correcting and building negative and inappropriate behaviors, again, be calm, clear, and consistent. Target one behavior at a time. Keep age and emotional age in mind. Help with understanding links between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Help with understanding consequences. Help with identifying alternatives to problem or negative behaviors. And encourage practice of techniques for changing negative thoughts and calming runaway emotions. Oh, one more, one more topic we're going to go over here really quick is just a choking refresher because it is important to know how to save somebody when choking. So choking is when a person can't speak, cough, or breathe because something is blocking or obstructing the airway. A piece of food, small toy, or body fluid such as vomit or blood. Choking prevents oxygen from getting to the lungs and brain, and lack of oxygen to the brain for more than 4 minutes may cause brain damage or death. Choking is especially common in young children and older adults, but a person of any age can choke. Some signs of choking: when are both hands clenched to the throat, a look of panic, shock, or confusion, inability to talk, strained or noisy breathing, squeaky sounds when trying to breathe, a cough which may either be weak or be forceful, skin, lips, and nails that change color, turning blue or gray, and loss of consciousness. You can prevent choking in adults with these safety measures. Cut food into small pieces, chew slowly and thoroughly, especially if wearing dentures. Don't laugh and talk while chewing and swallowing. Don't drink lots of alcohol before or after meals. You can prevent choking in children with these safety measures. Keep marbles, beads, thumbtacks, latex, balloons, coins, and other small toys and objects out of reach. Prevent children from walking, running, or playing when they have food and toys in their mouth. And don't feed children younger than age 4 foods that they can easily get lodged in their throat. And supervise meal times. So here is just a little short video that will show you exactly what to do when someone is choking. Oops. All right, sorry about that. Well, that does conclude our training for the annual refreshers. Just make sure that you do take the quiz. That is one of the requirements. And again, if you have to sign the central registry form, or if you have to complete a TB or CPR and first aid course, make sure you complete that as well. If you ever have any questions, make sure to reach out to us. But as of right now, this is all I have for you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much for taking the time to complete this.